All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our NSTA webinar, Your Electric School Bus Journey, Engaging with Your Electric Utility. This is a segment that is going to augment a presentation that we had at the midwinter meeting in Maui, Hawaii that was well received. My name is Kurt Mackison. I'm Executive Director of NSTA. And as we get started, I just have I have the antitrust statement and some announcements. Free Antitrust laws apply to trade associations and their members. A free exchange of ideas on matters of mutual interest to school bus entities is necessary for the success of all NSTA meetings. Such an exchange of views is essential to successful operation of every trade association. It is not the purpose of this policy to discourage the exploration depth of appropriate matters of legitimate concerns to meeting participants. To ignore certain antitrust ground rules, either through ignorance or otherwise, is to create a hazard with which prudent business persons cannot afford. NSTA believes that a fair and vigorous competition is essential to the maintenance of this country's free enterprise system. In furtherance of this principle, therefore, it is NSTA's policy to conduct all activities in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. NSTA expects its members to adhere to the antitrust laws regardless of where they are located or do business. NSTA expects that each and every one of its members understands and follows the antitrust and competition policies and laws where they are located or conduct business, including within the confines or auspices of NSTA. Next slide, please. Few housekeeping reminders. All attendees will be placed on mute for the duration of the broadcast. Time is built into this webinar at the end for questions. If you have questions throughout, please do not hesitate to use Command Center questions box, and we will ask the question on your behalf to our panelists. If you'd like to join our Manufacturers, Suppliers, and Technology Committee, one that puts together webinars like this, it meets the second Monday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you'd like to join, please contact us at info@yellowbuses.org. Just a reminder, our 2025 School Bus Driver International Safety Competition will be held in Austin, Texas. The dates are, actually, Gabby, I think these dates are incorrect. I think this is the 28th and 29th. We'll get back to you on that. And our save the date for the NSTA annual meeting convention at the Westin Copley Place in Boston. That's July 20th through the 23rd. Registration is coming out in the next week. One last thing, our awards and installation meeting is Tuesday night at the Westin Copley Place at the annual meeting and convention. If you would like to honor a deserving recipient for an NSTA award, you can click on this QR code, or else you can look for various mailings on this. I'm also going to put a plug in for the STN Innovator Award that we partner with School Transportation News. And you can scan the QR code here too to get an application for that as well. And with that, I am going to present our speaker for today, Greg Kresge, Senior Manager, Utility Engagement and Transportation Electrification with WRI. Greg presented at the midwinter meeting in Maui and had a lot of great information, and we decided to do this program as well to supplement the information that he had given us in Maui. So Greg, welcome, and I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this. So if I present, do I need to just start presenting, or did you hand it over to me already? Let's see.
Down at the bottom, do share your screen.
Okay. All right. Oh, there we go. Sure. Okay. And let me know when you've got that. You ready? Can you see my screen? Gabby, can you see my screen?
Sorry, Greg, I was on mute. I don't see your screen just yet. No.
Okay. Let's see.
You still see my screen?
No, let me escape out of here. Let me try sharing again. Do you see? Sure. How's that? Now can you see it?
Yes, I can see your screen now.
Good. Let me see if I can enter a slide. There. Is it full screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, here we go. So, hi, my name's Greg Kresge. So, Kurt and Gabby have already introduced me. Had a great session in Maui at the NSTA meeting. It seemed like there were a lot of questions. Wanted to make sure to get these slides in front of you guys again. I think Gabby will be able to make these slides available in the future, and also you're recording this session. So, and this is meant to be pretty interactive as far as, if you can put your questions in the chat, I will try to address everything and leave room for that at the end. There's a couple things that I'm adding into this slide. I'm going to emphasize a couple more things that maybe I didn't quite get able to reach in Maui. We had quite a long presentation, but I wanted to make sure to cover them today. So just a couple things. One is our purpose within the Electric School Bus Initiative within WRI, the World Resources Institute, is really to electrify the whole US fleet. Now that's about 500,000 buses. We're looking to try to do that as much as possible for these reasons. It's healthier for the kids and for the drivers. It's cleaner air, less emissions. There's reduced operating expenses, which come from, not having the oils and the liquids that normally are in the internal combustion engines, in addition to just having less moving parts. It's producing a whole workforce development that a lot of people don't quite realize, but it's on several fronts. It's not only on the vehicle itself, as far as manufacturing the vehicle, but now there's this whole associated industry with that as well, which is around the electric vehicle chargers and the infrastructure and the electronics that are required to go into it, and new connections by the utilities. So there's a lot of green manufacturing jobs. We're doing a lot of workforce development with, especially with community colleges and other organizations, trying to make sure that there's technicians out there to be able to help this adoption move forward and make sure that the buses can charge. And then we're also looking at these buses are medium and heavy duty fleets. I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of things that where these particular fleet vehicles, medium and heavy duty fleets, can be grid assistive. They don't have to necessarily be a burden on the grid, especially with managed charging. And that's going to get me to also this enhanced resiliency and renewables integration with vehicle to grid. When you see V2G, that's what it means, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do full V2G, sending energy back from the bus to the grid. You could actually send it to a site or to a different load. So that means that it doesn't necessarily have to have electrons flow back across the meter. So there's going to be a lot of language in these slides. If you have any questions, please let me know. Within our electric school bus initiative, cover real quickly, we work together as 5 pillars, with equity as our overarching umbrella. And that's trying to get electric school buses in the communities that need them the most, the fastest. So we are broken down into technical assistance within our Pillar 1 group. Pillar 2 is really working with the bus OEMs and the manufacturers in that space. In the utilities sector, that's my area. We actually cover utilities, utility engagement, utility interaction, trying to speed along the connection process. In addition to funding and financing is also within this pillar. We also work in federal and state policymakers, but also within the utility pillar, I will say we handle the charging infrastructure side of things as well as the utility commissioners and the regulatory environment for utilities. And then also the local communities, we engage local partners and communities, trying to make sure that everybody's aware of the potential for electric school buses, in addition to, especially on these resiliency efforts. So I'm going to move along. We have equity updates that we send out quite frequently. One thing about WRI and our electric school bus initiative is we're not a member-driven organization. So we actually are philanthropic funded. We are a nonprofit, and so we actually provide all of our resources and our technical assistance for free. So we also hold office hours, and we do a whole bunch of things where we try to put you in touch with the free resources or other partners that we're working with, like NSTA, that we try to engage with and make sure that we can get our materials and everything out in front of people who might need them the most. With that, I just wanted to give some updates. So as a lot of you know, Clean School Bus Program funding, some of that funding has been frozen, but I wanted to draw special attention to, or put on hold. Frozen might be the wrong term, but I wanted to draw your attention to some other funding mechanisms that are still available, the Section 45 and 30C tax credits. All these links are embedded into this presentation, so I'm not going to cover financing at this point because there's somebody else in our organization who can really speak to that. I really want to kind of get to the utility engagement piece, but here are some links that might be helpful if you wanted to look more into the funding and financing side of the school bus initiative. So in order to really move things along for fleet, transportation managers and school districts and transportation contractors, we put out this power planner for basically to try to help kind of give some visibility into what the utility might need from you in the beginning. And also how to some common terminology, as well as some things to look out for. So this proactive engagement for electric school bus deployment, this power planner is available for free. It's downloadable. If you see me at a conference or something in person, I'll usually have a copy of this with me. If you're interested in receiving one, a hardbound copy, it's I think about 11 or 12 pages long. Anyway, it goes through how to communicate with your utility. The main thing is that when you're looking at electrifying any part of your fleet, it's really important that you bring the utility into that discussion immediately, like even if you're just thinking about it. And the reason why is because you don't want to waste a lot of time in this area. You want to try to get the utility what they need in order to help you and to start that process. So and that is also choosing the correct contractor, making sure that the communication between you, the contractor, the manufacturers, whether that's the charger or the bus, and the utility are all working together for that common goal, which is to get these fleet vehicles connected and charging reliably. So first and foremost, I mentioned this already, reach out to your utility, let them know. You're going to see this later on in the presentation. I actually recommend that you try to do this in writing, as well as calling. So it's important that you get a common email address. You also have an interaction typically with the utility to begin with. That interaction is usually with what's called a key accounts manager or commercial accounts manager. They usually are the ones to be the interface between a commercial entity, whether that's transportation contractor operating out of a site paying an electric bill, That interaction and communication already has an avenue that's open with the utility. If you happen to be at a site which is leased and maybe your electricity is included in that lease agreement, you might have to take some extra steps to actually find that utility person who is responsible for servicing your commercial account. So we have 10 tips. These are covered within the Power Planner, but I just kind of wanted to go through a couple things here, which is, knowing where your power is coming from, what are your rates and fees, what are you currently paying now, realizing that you are moving from fossil fuels or liquid fuel source to electrons. Completely different fuel source, but at the same time, it's still fuel. And just recognizing that you're going to have a different vendor for that. So instead of a tanker truck pulling up and discharging, diesel fuel into a tank for your buses, you're now looking at connecting wires and having to go through a similar meter process. So you have a meter at your site. It's looking at your consumption. That is basically sort of think of electrons as fuel, as liquid fuel. You're basically kind of trying to do the same thing. You're moving those electrons from one place to another, and then you're getting charged for those electrons. The other thing too is there might be a lot of resources that your utility provides that you may not know about. And this is where I'm going to try to move through these slides to show you some of those resources that might be available. So for example, so I'm based out of Hawaii, but our utility teams up with what's called Hawaii Energy. It's a nonprofit organization. They actually provide a contractor list. So I recommend that you start looking for some of these resources because they may be there already for you. You don't have to cold call an electrician. You should be able to find an electrician that actually has and when we're talking EVSE, that's the electric vehicle service equipment or supply equipment, that is going to be like your charger or your wires or your conduit or your pad, your cement pad, your bollards that protect your charger. All those things are part of this EVSE equipment. Your utility probably has some sort of connection, hopefully with a qualified and licensed contractor that they would recommend for work in this space. And then also, looking at your utility to look at a near-term plan as well as a long-term plan. So if you're starting out with a couple buses, you may not need to build out your site for, your electrification of your whole fleet right at the moment. That also may require a lot more power than you actually have available at your site. So one thing that we wanted to really talk about too is all of these all fleet vehicles should be managed when we're talking about charging. That is to really pay attention to the community that surrounds you in addition to how your grid functions. So a lot of places have peaks at different times. So for example, our peak in Hawaii is between 5 and say 9 or 10 p.m. That's when people come home, they're doing their laundry. We're fully electrified in Hawaii. That means that all of our appliances and everything is all electric. We don't really have gas as an option. And we don't have big heating needs. So, for example, if you're going to be cooling down your environment, that's usually air conditioning for us. That's all electrified in addition to our cooking, our drying, our hot water heating. In other places, you probably have access to liquefied natural gas or something like that. That probably does half of that for you. So the loads and the peaks may shift. If you're aware of those peaks, that's really important because if your utility can't meet the need with their most efficient units, what they'll do is they'll turn on peaker units, and those peaker units are there specifically to meet that peak. So for example, the peak in Arizona in the summer is going to be in the middle of the day. That's when the air conditioning load is the highest. that is when they would have to turn on these peaker units to make up for some of that power that they need to service the customers. If you can stay off of that peak, that's going to be better for the community at large and also for you. You'll probably see it in your rates. So I'm going to throw out there, in addition to managed charging, there is another component that is really, really important when you're in this realm of electric vehicle charging infrastructure and supply equipment. That is around service level agreements. So this is to ensure that you have a reliable charging environment and you don't get stuck in the middle. I can tell you horror stories about this. I used to manage and procure, construct, install, implement, operate, and maintain the fast chargers that were owned by Hawaiian Electric across 5 islands. And the horror stories that I have is that, if you don't have a service level agreement in place and you don't have methods and really clearly defined roles and responsibilities for who maintains the charging equipment, you can very easily, as the transportation manager or director, be stuck in the middle between a non-working charger and your fleet vehicle. There's sometimes that can be a simple firmware upgrade that is maybe done over the air overnight, and all of a sudden the communication link is broken. With a service level agreement, you have one person or one company taking charge of those chargers and making sure that they're operating, they're maintained, that they communicate properly to the environment. If they're managed charging and they're done over the air, that all of those things are handled together and they're done as a cohesive unit. This is what a service level agreement is about. And we actually have some resources on our website that specifically talk about service level agreements and why you need them. What is the benefit to having that? The other part of that horror story that I wanted to talk about is I had a charger that ended up being inoperable for 6 months. And that meant that the community was out that charger. They didn't have access to that charger. So now there's a void in that environment. We don't want that to happen. We want these chargers to be up and running and as reliable as possible. And we also talk about things like uptime. Uptime is, how out of a 24-hour day, how often is that charger working as it was designed? And we're looking at trying to get to 98, 99%. That still results in a couple days out of 365 days a year. That still results in a couple days of functioning time. So it's really important to be aware of what that looks like. And also, be aware that your school bus, your school day period might be 180 of those days a year. So maybe 365 days of the year is not as meaningful as saying you need to be 98% uptime, reliable, those 180 days a year of which I need the charger to be 100% reliable. So there's another part of this too, which is I talked about the benefits of electrifying the school bus fleet. One of those that a lot of people don't realize is our gas markets and our fossil fuel environments are very volatile. And you see this when, if you hear the news or you're paying attention to stock prices or things like that, you will see that, and a lot of times it's political. It's actually not about supply and demand. It's not that there's a shortage of supply. Sometimes there's a falsely created shortage of supply to keep prices high. We see this, this has happened over, decades and decades, ever since we started using fossil fuel. The people who control fossil fuel production, they will hold back. And in the past, it used to be OPEC was, the oil producing countries in the Middle East. They would purposely pull back on supply to keep prices high. This is another thing. So with this volatility in the market, it's not always rational. It also can be extremely political. And you I want to show the difference between that volatility in that market in addition to what electric rates are. So you're replacing now your fossil fuel uh, vehicle with your electric vehicle. Look at the bottom line down there. The red line at the bottom is the electricity price. The reason why that is so stable is because electricity prices, especially in investor-owned utilities, they will require years of work to go through what's called a rate case. A rate case is how utilities justify the rates that they're charging you to the commission and to the consumer advocates that are functioning on your behalf as consumers to keep prices low. So they have to justify this typically 3 to 5 years out in advance. So those rates, the rates that you're seeing now were justified three years ago by a whole staff of people at the utility, in addition to the commissions, in addition to the consumer advocates. What that does is it means that it sets that price for a long period of time without a lot of volatility. Unlike the other ones that you see, the blue line being gasoline, that other blue line being diesel, you see those huge spikes in the market. A little bit more along that similar line is that CNG, but it's still not as uh, as low as the electricity rate. Okay, so the other thing too is you're going to see there are some tools that are online that you can calculate your savings by switching to electric vehicles. You can do this on what's called an A-Fleet tool. This is hosted by Argonne National Laboratory. You can actually plug in, what you can expect on a diesel powertrain as well as an electric vehicle powertrain. And it will give you the comparison in miles per gallon per diesel gallon equivalent. That's what that MPDGE is for. So that you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. You're taking diesel and you're looking at electric vehicle as a diesel equivalent so that you're getting that comparison. So you can see that, your maintenance per mile is much less when it comes to electric vehicles. So this link should be working for you. I highly advise that you go and take a look at this link. There's a lot of other resources there also about electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging and charges that you can expect from that. Okay, so Kurt wanted me to touch on a couple things. So I threw this into the middle of the slides. I'm going to give a disclaimer. While I have participated in our local Hawaii gas tax solution, finding for the state, because the state is the one that receives the gas tax for us. The state of Hawaii will receive, portions of cents on the dollar per gallon. They get that at the pump. That goes from the fee that the gas station charges to the state to be able to do, it's usually road maintenance. So with that, when I participated, I actually had a GPS device in my vehicle and plugged that in to participate in looking at how many miles I drove. What did that look like in my case, it was my electric vehicle. And being able to see what the different options might be to make up that tax, because as more and more of the market becomes electric, there's less and less money that is coming to the state Department of Transportation for their road work. So there's some things that you can expect to see on gas tax replacements. One is that you'll see already probably there's increase in registration fees, and that's based on weight of the vehicle. In some cases, there might also be a flat fee just because it's an electric vehicle. We have both on my registration. I have the fee that is the weight of the vehicle in addition to an add-on that is an electric vehicle rate. There's also, Kurt mentioned to me that they're looking at a potential fee per mile traveled. I personally think that that's going to result in a really difficult to monitor situation, just because then you as the contractor is going to have to report that mileage to somebody. That's a whole bunch of extra work that has to be done with a lot of different agencies and a lot of different personnel to be able to staff that up. The other thing that you potentially could see down the line is you're switching fuel sources. So if you were paying gas tax, on a volumetric basis before per gallon of diesel, and you were paying cents or fractions of cents on the per gallon, you might get that as an electric rate. We do see this in Hawaii already. We have a green fee that gets tacked on to everybody's electric bill, and that helps to go fund renewable energy projects. That might be something that comes up in this realm. But I would like you to consider this. If you have the potential to get involved in this and you're looking at moving your fleet to electric, it's really important that you pay attention to this, because this can be an add-on that can actually result in quite a significant increase in cost. My background is environmental. I used to do underground storage tank removals, fossil fuel cleanups, in addition to a lot of other toxic and hazardous waste mitigation. My experience is the biggest thing that degrades asphalt is actually spilled oil. They're the same product. So when you mix oils together, they tend to, act like solvents. They break things apart. That same thing happens with asphalt. So if you have a fossil fuel vehicle, or you have an oil drivetrain vehicle that is leaking, and that oil leaks onto the pavement, onto asphalt, it will start to degrade. And that's what really causes potholes. In addition to, weight can also be a factor, but I think also weight becomes more of a factor when this asphalt starts to degrade because the oil has already been spilled in that area. My biggest, my thing that I jump to immediately is that I feel like that biggest road work requirement and filling potholes and that sort of thing is actually hand in hand with leaking oil from vehicles, especially fossil fuel vehicles. But again, disclaimer, this is based on my limited background, or extensive background maybe, in the fossil fuel industry, doing cleanups and how that works. All right. So I'm going to go over also looking at, this is a resource that we came up with. We actually went out to some transportation contractors, to school districts. We got this proofed by your industry to make sure that we were making some correct assumptions. This is around, what do you really need when you're charging? When you're looking at moving to electric vehicles as your fleet, this is kind of what we were saying that you could expect from an electric school bus in the school day. This is a timeline that kind of shows when that charging can happen, when the routes happen, when the buses are sitting idle. I think we put this together so that we could all walk away with a common understanding of, what we can expect from that electric school bus. In some cases, you might hear that 100% of that school bus can be utilized. That's not necessarily true. A lot of times you're going to not discharge or use more of that driving range in that school bus below 30%. 30% is kind of a bottom line, 20 to 30%. And then you're going to charge it back up to 85 to, some go to 100%, but usually the range is between 30% and 85%. Especially in the fast charging environment, people don't realize that fast charging will happen very quickly in the beginning, up to 85%. And then once you reach 85%, it goes to a trickle charge, which is even lower than like a level 2 charger. That's to help protect the battery. So, you know, trying to get to that additional 100%, that additional 15% on your charger, especially in the fast charging environment, is going to take you almost as much time as it is to charge that front up to 85%. So these are some of the things to consider. So this product is available. The link is down on the lower left-hand side. If you wanted to be able to download this and talk to other people or have it in a pitch deck or something like that, you can download this resource for free. I also wanted to bring up this is about utilities providing some fleet services. We're seeing some utilities are doing a really great job of this. Some utilities are actually reaching out to fleets, and they're providing these fleet planning services or fleet assessment services where they'll actually in some cases, they'll actually do a site visit. They'll come out, take a look at your meter, take a look at your site, meet with you, look at how many vehicles you're trying to install, look for the nearest power source that could be outside of your facility where they would need to bring the power from in order to feed your electric school bus needs. So here's some links to some programs where they're doing this well. The other thing too is there are make-ready programs in a lot of utilities that have been approved by commissions or boards that allow for utilities to pay for a certain amount of infrastructure, and sometimes up to and including the charger. So these are really important to be aware of in your utility so that you can help offset as much cost as possible. When you start looking at infrastructure costs outside of your site, that can add up very, very quickly. If you have to like bring power from another line or another area and you have to run a new line, put in a new pole, put on new transformers, that can get very expensive very quickly. So make-ready programs are there to help electrify fleets and be able to help offset some of those costs. So it's really important that you can find your utility and see if they have a make-ready program that's available. That would be one of the things to ask your utility in that very beginning conversation, which is, hey, do you have any make-ready funds, make-ready programs that will help fund the electric vehicle chargers or the infrastructure needed to bring the power to the site? This is, I told you about one of the tools that we have, in Hawaii, we have this Hawaii Energy. You see it up there in the top left-hand side of the screen. This is what I get if I log into the utility, the Hawaii Energy site. This is specifically for a contractor that's on my island. This is, I'm located on Maui, have a business. So I put in, if I was, let's say, a transportation contractor, I put in that, I'm a business, I'm looking for EV charging stations, and I'm looking for engineering, design, and consulting. That might be different than actually after you get the design done, I'm looking for a contractor, an electrical contractor. And I would always recommend that you use a licensed contractor. So this is an example, and then you can see on the right-hand side, this is what comes up. So I can contact any of these companies, and they should be able to help me with my electric vehicle charging needs. It goes back to the make-ready stuff again. So sorry for the kind of a little bit disjointed, but I wanted to kind of tell you what make-ready typically is, and we have a whole product about what make-ready is. We have a make-ready website area within the Electric School Bus Initiative. It talks about what these make-ready programs are: line extensions, transformer upgrades. Transformer is, a lot of people don't know, it's what helps deliver high voltage to your site, which needs to be stepped down. You can't get, 29,000 volts at your facility. Your equipment would not be able to handle that sort of voltage. Excuse me. So what ends up happening with that is you have to have a transformer that brings that power down to something usable. So it's a necessary piece of the equipment. Your meter socket, you're not going to get electricity to your site unless you have that meter there. And then, all these other things, the supply equipment, and then of course, the last thing on that slide is the vehicle itself. So here are some key components for success. Look at these make-ready programs, see how it's got ongoing maintenance and, some of those things that are included in this. There's incentives. Sometimes there's actually incentives for chargers. Consider the vehicle to grid applications. If you can store energy in the battery of the bus and then you can discharge it later for some other purpose, or you can offset your charging to a later time, you might actually be able to get paid for that. The utility might be able to pay you money for being able to participate in that. That's really important when you're starting to see a bus that's just sitting there, especially during times when you're not providing transportation services to students or to schools. Those buses can be assets. And that's where we really want to see this move, is that those vehicles can become assets to the community, to the grid, to the utility, and you can probably get paid for those. We're involved in several projects across the United States where that happens. We look at the energy stored in batteries to be able to be used in all of these aspects. So as this technology continues to increase and more bi-directional vehicles capable of storing energy and then discharging them later, these services are going to become more available. So we have a goal. One of those goals is, hey, we want to get these chargers in from the time that you go to the utility to the time which should be in the very beginning as you're even thinking about the fleet conversions. We want those chargers to be up and running and being able to charge in under 12 months. That is a timeline that kind of matches up also with the ordering of new buses. So we want those to fall in line with each other. Some places are doing this even faster. Some places are taking much longer to do it. So it's really important to try to do that as soon as possible. Here's some other resources. I provided QR codes on all of these so that you can scan them if you want to get there, or you can click on the links. I did have a Rolling Stones, sort of, you can always, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might just get what you need. And in order to do that, the big part of this is you have to try. And bring in and start coordinating with the right people at the right time. At this point, I'm not going to do a Menti thing, but here's my contact information because I would like to be able to go on and answer questions if there's questions. So that's what I have for you today, and I think we're right at time for questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg. For your presentation, a lot of great information to share there. Once again, we'll have the slideshow available for everyone to view. I just have a quick question for you, and I know this is going to vary, amongst the utilities, but for folks who don't have a long-standing established relationship, with their electric utility, and may be intimidated by this process, where does one start to develop that?
Yeah, can you still hear me, Kurt?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I would say, so every utility that I know of has a trouble desk. They have a dispatch center. And that is because they have customers who need to be able to report problems or report outages or things like that. So I would say probably the best thing to do and I can also provide a tool. I will provide something if I can pull it up fast enough. I have a website that I use that is called it's called a utility finder. Let me see if I can pull this up. This will give you the ability to find your utility that services your area and should be able to give you a contact point. So let's see, I think this is the website. Yes, this is the website. So you can search by your zip code. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is a really helpful link. I use this all the time actually to verify which utilities are the ones that I should be speaking to, because you can have a situation where your utility at your house is going to be very different than the utility at your business. So let's say, for example, I'm in PG&E territory in Northern California. That's Pacific Gas and Electric. But if, let's say my business is in San Jose, California. San Jose, California actually has a municipal utility. So that utility is different than PG&E. Even though they're surrounded by PG&E, you might need to check and see who your utility is to make sure that you get to the right person. So one, I would call the dispatch office or the trouble desk, whatever main utility number is, and I would ask them a couple questions. The first one would be, do you have an electric vehicle group? And see if they do. If they do, ask for that contact information. And hopefully there's a person, but also hopefully there's an email address that you can get a hold of them. And like I said in the beginning, it's really important. We've seen some horror stories with utilities and school districts where we've had turnover within the utility, and all of that history is gone with that individual person. So it's really important that if you can get it to a centralized or a common email address that is monitored by the team, and if that team changes employees, that somebody else takes that on, rather than being sent to, Bob Smith at, some utility. And then that person leaves, and then your history is gone with them. So you really want to make sure that you can kind of be consistent with that. That would be my biggest advice. So I hope that answers your question, Kurt.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. I think the other, question that folks might, want to know, and I'm not sure that you or anyone else on Earth has an answer to this, but in terms of the cadence in which utilities, address these various projects, having worked on the inside, is there, I'm sure there's some rhyme or reason to how they're, addressed, but, everybody would want, obviously, their project to be first, but that's not feasible. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are several advancements within the larger utilities, and a lot of this is they've moved to an online application process. So when we talk about, there's a couple terms to be familiar with. One is, if you're looking to establish a lot of electric vehicle specific rates would require you to have a separate meter. So that would require a service request or an interconnection agreement. So they're basically the same, very similar things. An interconnection agreement is basically saying to the utility, I want to connect, to the utility, but also an interconnection agreement is if you're sending energy back to the utility. We see this very commonly in areas that have, like, for example, high photovoltaic penetration, like Hawaii or California. When you have rooftop PV, that requires an interconnection agreement, and there's certain things that go into that application process. But I would actually say, if, let's say you're not participating in vehicle to grid right at this moment, and that is an additional step. Let's say you just want to connect your site to be able to get power for your buses, and just to do one direction, meaning that you're going to charge your buses with electric power from the grid. If that happens, then this is in the wheelhouse of the utility. This is what they do for a living. There's just because it's an electric vehicle doesn't mean it's any different unless you're participating in a specific program. But it's a load like any other. Let's say Walmart is putting in a new store down the street from you. They're going through a very similar process that you would go through about, how much power do you need? When do you need it? Where is your site? Who's going to, how are we going to connect it to your service panel? Where is the meter going to go? All of these questions are the same for everybody, whether it's an electric vehicle or whether it's a new, service request just for a meter at any business, a building, for example. So I would say you're going to get put into this process where people make the biggest mistake is they come to the utility too late. So think about, the Walmart going in. The Walmart starts engaging with the utility well before they even buy the property. They need to know, where are they going to get their power from? They're going to start that process so early on because if they can't get power to that site, they're not going to build there. So it's like one of the very first things they do. So that's the same thing that I would recommend with electric school buses or electrifying your fleet. It's the same thing. Like as soon as you start thinking that that's even an option for you, bring the utility in so you can start having those discussions and getting that infrastructure in place. One of the things, Kurt, you told me that is a big deal for school bus transportation contractors is that, a lot of these sites are not owned by the contractor, they're leased. That's an additional layer that you need to go through because in a lot of cases, if you want new service at that site, you are probably also going to have to get approval or some form of sign off from the landlord. So, and that can take a whole bunch of extra time. I've had horror stories where that has taken me a year just to get the landlord to sign off on putting electric vehicle infrastructure there. And that's because it was managed by, it's a site that's here, my local site, but it's managed by a corporate entity out of, some other part of the country. It has many different layers to it. It has to go through legal review. It was a super long process. So try to find out who, I would say, even if you're not getting an electric school bus right at the moment, go ahead and contact your utility and find out who that is now so that when that does come, that you are ready to go. So.
All right. Thank you for that, Greg. I don't see any questions or hands up in there. So I don't know, Greg, if you have a closing remarks, but no, it doesn't seem like we have any more questions.
Yeah, so just so that you know, we're doing a lot of vocalization, I guess I would say, and trying to really get people to look at managed charging as a necessity and not an add-on. I'm going to say two things about that. One is, especially if you're looking at installing fast chargers, that are in fast charging, I would say anything above 50 kilowatts. And unless you have a charger, you might not know what that is. But anytime you're looking at fast charging, you're looking at, 10x the cost of a lower level charger. That's a lot of resources to put into a charging environment that is still a very manual process. That it's almost a lot of times it's a refrigerator sized box. It's very expensive. They can be, $80,000 to $100,000 with the equipment and the installation and the management of that device. And if it's only as good as the last vehicle that you plug in. So if that fast charger is what you have and you're dumping so many resources into that charger, just realize that when you guys leave for the day, the last vehicle that's plugged into is what that asset is being used for. And even if it's not discharging energy or charging the bus, that's where you might want to consider, how do I best utilize the assets that I have and make sure that I utilize them to their best capacity? And that's where we say, hey, it looks like there should be a portfolio of chargers. There should be some fast chargers, and then there should be some slower chargers, so that when you walk away at the end of the day and that vehicle is plugged in, one, hopefully it charges when it's the least expensive to you. And then two, it's not having this very valuable, expensive asset tied to it until the next person comes in the next day and unplugs it and plugs something else in.
All right. Well, a tremendous amount of information, Greg. I want to thank you on behalf of NSTA. Once again, our presenter, Greg Kresge from World Resources Institute. Greg, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this, and enjoy the rest of your day in Hawaii.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's nice and sunny today. Again. Okay, thank you, Kurt and Gabby. Thank you both. Take care.